Kincaid and Breckenridge on News Talk 770. Kevin Milligan from UBC's Vancouver School of Economics will join us after 11 o'clock. Controversial new study that throws a whole lot of cold water on this idea of a national universal child care program. We'll talk about that. But this whole debate over street parking, the other day, Roger, I came home and I saw this guy parked in front of my house. I was very, very upset because my wife was in the car, but hey, but people do get upset. We talk about...
Where's that drum kit I asked for, by the way?
When we talk about secondary suites, right, this is the first thing people bring up.
Right.
Well, that's going to be more people parking on my street. It's going to be people parking in front of my house, as though that's theirs. And is that necessarily the case?
Now, this issue pops up like dandelions, which actually reminds me about another topic we need to discuss. But this comes up again and again and again. And we've seen it in the newspapers. We've seen it all over the media time and again. And this time, it's a resident of Southview, a man named Justin Kern, who's taken matters into his own hands by putting a sign on his lawn that says, if you don't live here, don't park in front of my house, with a curse word describing his house. I think it's a nice house, by the way. I don't think it's an F-word house at all. I think it's a lovely... We should all be so fortunate to live in such a house.
I don't know if the person who took this picture covered up one of the letters or if he's just left one letter out, because right now it just says UCKIN.
He took them off. They said, that's a vulgar sign, please take it off your lawn. So he said, I'll just make it not vulgar. That was his response, and he says it's been effective. The other thing that might make it effective is that he's a larger gentleman with a lot of tattoos. But here's the point, though, okay, because this comes up again and again and again, and there's a bylaw around this. There's actual laws that tell us who has the legal authority to park in front of a house on an unmarked street. And here to navigate that with us very briefly is Mike Derbyshire, General Manager of the Calgary Parking Authority. Mike, it's great to have you with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So I guess the simple question is, can you tell somebody not to park on the street in front of your house?
Absolutely not. As a private property owner, no. The issue is that parking in Calgary on public streets is a privilege. It's not a right. So homeowners do not own the land in front of their house from a parking perspective. Now, there are several considerations in the bylaw that allow us to address that from a special needs perspective, whether it's some sort of disability or some other restriction around driveways or other things. But the actual curb space in front of your house does not belong to you or anybody else for that matter. It belongs to the community.
Now, we do have, of course, neighborhoods in Calgary where there is concern about street parking, and so residents have special passes that they put in their vehicles so that they can park there, others cannot. So how does that change the dynamic then?
Well, if there is, and I don't have the exact numbers with me, you'll have to beg my forgiveness.
Sure.
But there is a process in place under the bylaw in which residents in an area that they believe are affected by parking concerns, so like being around a major school or university or something like that, to have a residential parking permit program implemented in the area. It requires a majority of the residents on that block base to sign up for the program, and then we administer that from an enforcement and a permitting perspective to ensure that those residents' wishes are dealt with. But in terms of areas where there are no restrictions around parking, individual residents clearly don't have the authority or the right, if you will, to dictate who parks in front of their house.
Right. But it does seem to me that having that kind of a program to begin with almost kind of buys into this notion, though, that residents do have a right to park in front or should have first crack at that street in front of their house.
Not necessarily. It depends on the type of situation that's involved. So particularly in those areas that have unlimited or very, very high usage, like around shopping centers, around universities, where perhaps people are parking for other purposes, not parking for residential purposes. And so we look at those situations in concert with our partners at the City of Calgary Transportation Branch to determine which block faces have higher usage rates and what those usage rates are. So what those usage rates are by using our Park Plus system, we can scan plates, we can see how long people are parking in those areas and at what time of day as well. And then we can develop a joint strategy around what restrictions, if any, are appropriate for that particular area.
Okay.
Mike, before we let you go, Mike, there are times, though, when a vehicle might be illegally parked in an unmarked zone. I believe after 3 weeks or without a license plate. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So that's provincial legislation that talks about abandoned autos, and it's 72 hours. It's not 3 weeks. And,
oh, sorry, that's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, so anytime after 3 days, if a vehicle has not been moved, it's subject to seizure by the Calgary Parking Authority and impoundment. And, clearly if vehicles are unregistered, or if they're not registered or insured on a public street, they can also be seized and towed away as well.
All right, Mike, I know it's a busy day for you. I just want to say thanks for taking some time out of it to talk to us.
No problem. I really appreciate the opportunity to set the record straight.
All right, good stuff. Take care, sir. That's Mike Derbyshire, General Manager of the Calgary Parking Authority, saying that the property owner has no right to tell you can't park on that piece of property, that piece of asphalt in front of his or her property.
Right. Well, and so that's a fact. And so this guy with his sign has no leg to stand on here. So people are free to park in front of his house if they so choose. Now, maybe the sign's aggressive enough, or this guy's burly enough that might scare some people off, but otherwise there's no need to. You can park there if you want. Now, it does seem to me, I mean, there is that, I still think a bit of hypocrisy in the city's policy, because so what if you live near a park or a school?
Or a C-train station, I think, is
or a C-train
big frustration
station
for a lot of people.
That the street's there, people are free to park on it. First come, first serve. If there's a spot in that street, park on it. So why do some people in some areas have that protection from the city and other people in other areas don't?
No, it's a great question, and it does show a little bit of two sides of the same coin, if you will. But then there's also this question about just common courtesy. And that's where I'm really curious to know where people come down. Now, we have to take a short commercial break here, but you've heard this story, and now you've heard from Mike Derbyshire from the Calgary Parking Authority. But what do you think? Is it fair? Is Rob right? I mean, why is it only some people get the right to park in front of their home, whereas others don't? And is there some common courtesy at play here that perhaps this gentleman in Southview is missing? 9748255. We want to hear your thoughts on this matter. It's Kincaid and Breckenridge on News Talk 770.
Roger Kincaid and Rob Breckenridge.